it, but it's okay. You don't have to move up. But answering non-TFs. So we're gonna go over this in two categories. The first category will be going over framework and how to strategically use framework, because so many people use it unstrategically and then they lose to KAFs. And then the second way would just be how to go KVK if you want to take down a non-TF. So we'll go over those different strategies there. Can someone just quickly like regurgitate the parts of topicality / framework that there are? Yeah.
Interpretation, violation, standard, voter.
Insert, violation, standard, voter. So in this lecture, I'll teach you how to utilize framework itself a little bit more strategically, or a little bit more tricky when you're hitting K debaters, because you're probably going to hit a K debater at least once, probably 3 times, probably more in your lifetime. So you want to be able to engage with them. So I'm not going to go over basic stuff. If you're not familiar with interpretation, violation, standard, voters, I will probably somewhat mention them in the lecture itself, but I'll only ever go over like general content, never the in-depth content. But basically, some of the common voters that you'll see are fairness, obviously, and education. You'll see jurisdiction if any of you are Northeast debaters, but if you're not a Northeast debater, you probably won't see it as often. What's your name?
Ruth.
Yeah, so if you're not a Northeast debater, you won't see jurisdiction, but jurisdiction's an optional voter. Jurisdiction basically means it's the judge's obligation to only ever vote on the arguments within the round or based off of the resolution. But these are the two common types of voters. Now, when someone is reading a critical app, they are almost always ready to answer the fairness debate. Like they're always sitting up and there's like, fairness itself is arbitrary, it does not matter. Which is why it's up to you to change the fairness or to change the voters of the round and to actually talk about education instead. So if you are going for framework or if you're going for topicality, go for an educational voter, because this is good, because if you're trying to set up an interpretation that's like you must defend the hypothetical implementation of the resolution, then having education be the voter will let you get all of their offense while muting a lot of the offense that they're going to go for, because their 1 AR is probably ready and posed to stand up and be like, fairness doesn't matter, fairness itself is arbitrary. You should be able to answer those claims by going for education instead. So you should up-layer on education. But if you are very like, I don't know, need to go for fairness, I'll teach you ways to do that. Yeah, Anya?
So like, what if you tried to, like, because I'm like a California debater, so like, if I were to run jurisdiction, do you think like that anyone would have a comeback to it, or do you think like it's just so non-strategic that I shouldn't use it at all?
I think that jurisdiction is a voter to some degree, but I think it's more of an internal link. So the reason as to why I say that is because if jurisdiction means that it's about the judge's obligation to evaluate like in-round impacts only based on the resolution, then what is the terminal impact of the judge doing that? I think the terminal impact of the judge doing that is either fairness or education. So I think that jurisdictional claims will collapse oftentimes to fairness or education. So it's not that it's unstrategic to go for it, but a lot of West Coast judges would probably think, where is your fairness and education voter, because jurisdiction will collapse to it instead. Are we all good with that? Cool. So you can go for those two voters, you can go for those two voters. If you are totally against going education and you're like hardline, I need to defend fairness. Fairness is real, it's an impact, it matters to me. Let's talk about that. So if you want to defend fairness, there are a couple ways in which you can do it. There's procedural fairness and then there's structural fairness. Does anyone know the difference between the two? Yeah.
Procedural fairness is like having the same opportunity around, kind of like, say it was like a game of football, each side has the same rules, they have like an equal opportunity to score and stuff. Mm-hmm. Structural fairness is just like the kind of disadvantages that are there out of round that kind of filter in around like certain groups having an easier time achieving things than others.
Yeah, cool. So there's two types of fairnesses, and I think Rithvik, right?
Yeah.
Did a very good job at explaining what it is. There is procedural and then there's structural. The procedural fairness is exactly what he's talking about in the sense of like it's being about the rules of debate. It's about how exactly do you take all of the arguments within the round and you try to make it as procedurally fair as possible. Whereas structural fairness is all about the out of round impacts, like how is you being like a small schools debater, maybe a minority debater, maybe a gender minority debater, impacting your performance within the round. Now, obviously, if you are the person that's running framework or topicality, you would want to go for procedural fairness because they're probably making a structural fairness claim. They're probably saying that the round is so bad for me because of my identity, the round is so structurally skewed against me because I'm a woman, because I'm black, something along those sorts, right? So you want to go for procedural claims where it's that if we all enter the debate space, we all have equal grounds of contestation, which means it's a question of how exactly we can engage within the arguments the most. A lot of debaters, when they're running framework apps, are going to make questions on accessibility. How exactly have you made the debate space more accessible? You need to make the argument as the negative that the debate space itself is inherently unfair, but the rules that we have or the ways in which we engage allow for us to come up with different tactics to make debate itself more accessible. So go for procedural fairness claims as a framing issue. You should always start the top of the 2NR with it's a question of procedural fairness and how debate itself is a game, because you want to win that your model is true. Because remember, the K debater will always win that their model itself is a good idea. You just have to win why your model of debate itself is a better idea, or it's a better idea for people to engage. So we're cool with this? Great. Some common standards that people run are obviously like clash, predictability, stuff like that. I think that you need to explode these more. Like, let's say screw all the other standards that people run, like limits and all that. Let's talk about clash for a moment here. Clash is so essential when you're running topicality or when you're running framework, because it's a gateway issue to how exactly you're going to contest a lot of the arguments that they're talking about. Clash would say that it's a question of us being able to even engage within your paradigmatic issue. So if they're talking about model minorities, for instance, and they're like Asian people are oppressed within the status quo, then you should be able to set up a clash standard where it's like, how exactly can we engage with any of the paradigms that they're talking about, or any of the issues that they're talking about. So your framework debate or your topicality debate should never be divorced from the aff. This lets you set up a lot of turns the case scenarios. So if you are going for framework, you should always have your framework or T-shell set up to turn the aff. So your standards should take out the aff. Like the example I gave before is if I'm defending a K-aff, my K-aff is about model minorities, and I'm like, if I can't engage with your aff, then not only it ever devolves about you, and you can only talk about your model minorityness, means that other minorities cannot engage with you or check your movement or check your plan, means that your aff is bad in the real world because it crushes types of movements. I have effectively turned the case, but I have turned the case on the framework shell. Always implement turns the case argument when you're going for the framework shell, because you want to be able to at least address the aff as much as possible. You never want to ignore the aff or the story of the aff, because that's how you end up losing the debate. Now, a couple of framing issues that you're going to have when you're talking about both the voters and the standards is a question of the role of the ballot, the RVI, the impact turn. What is the RVI?
Reverse voting impact.
Reverse voting issue, yeah. So it's a reverse voting issue. Basically, it's a defensive argument that can be terminal offense at the end of the day if the 1AR tries to collapse to it. So if the 1AR goes for a reverse voting issue, what they're effectively saying is that since you read this argument is so bad that I must be able to win off of it, because terminal defense means that there's such a time skew or there's such a time press within the round that I should be able to win that argument. Going for the time skew argument or going for a reverse voting issue, you always need to preempt this as if you're the negative. People also go for impact turns. Impact turns basically say that your idea of fairness itself is so intrinsically bad that there's no reason to justify you. Your idea of education itself is so intrinsically bad that there's no reason to justify you. So you need to have arguments as to why fairness, why RVIs and impact turns don't make any sense, and there's no way to evaluate that. So always have within your voter section or your paradigm issues, no RVIs, and no impact turns. So many people only ever do the no REIs, but when it comes to like layering or weighing, you want to say no impact turns so that they can't leverage the case. Another thing that you want to say is no crossapps from case or from substance. So the reason as to why you want to say that is because so many people are going to try to weigh their case against the NC, no matter what. So like if I'm reading a mono-minority app, I'm definitely gonna weigh my mono-minority KF against you. I'm gonna be like, your form of framework is policing me. Your form of framework is telling minority students that they have to calm down, act respectable, act in one monolithic way. Then you don't want that to happen. You have to make arguments as to why cross-applying substance itself is a bad idea and why they should never be able to do that within the round, and that you should only ever default to procedurals, not substantive issues. So do weighing claims as to why procedural questions comes as a prerequisite to any substantive questions. Are we all clear with that? Cool. Let's talk about some more tricky things that you can do with topicality, and I'm going to call some of these arguments like a bait and switch argument. But one thing that you can do with topicality shells is do not read your normative, defend hypothetical implementation of the resolution. Read an actual T-shell that says that they violate military capabilities. Or like they violate some part of the resolution. The reason as to why I say this is because so many debaters are set up to answer a state good debate. So they're ready to say the state itself is bad, the state itself doesn't make any sense, the state itself is just nonsensical. They are not, however, ready to defend why military offensive capabilities means the definition that you pose to them, or why Japan means this definition that you pose onto them, or why Article 9 means this definition. So if you're reading a T-shell, not a framework shell, or a T-shell that doesn't define resolve, but rather defines military offensive capabilities in this one way, it becomes very easy for you to win that because they would have to either read a counter definition or they would have to do more layering claims as to why yours doesn't matter. Because you're not telling them to defend the state, what you're telling them to do is defend your version or your definition of military offensive capabilities. So become a little bit cheaty with how exactly you're going for some of the topicality claims and how exactly you're going for some of the topicality arguments. Yeah.
So like, what would your inter be? For like, if you're just gonna, would you just be like, interpretation, like offensive military capabilities, like means X.
And then you read the definition, yeah.
And then violation, they'd be like, they don't like defend this, or
yeah, exactly.
If you do that, would all of your like skills cards have to be like super tied to the resolution? Like, I don't know, some sort of policy simulation is good. Just like really specific to the resolution rather than reading stuff like state engagement is useful.
Well, you can still read state engagement as useful cards. However, you would want it to tie it back to why learning about military offensive capabilities, if that's the word that you're defining, is most important. Or why talking about, let's say, like Article 9 is most important, because Article 9 might teach you the different tactics of engaging within things like militarism in the first place. Because if you don't learn about Article 9, then the state can always infiltrate your movements and co-opt it in some way, shape, or form. So you want to have those types of arguments in order to win the round. None of the other kids enter the room, right? Okay. Sorry, office wants to do a check-in. Okay, yeah. So that's one of the tactics that you can take when reading T. Another tactic that you can take with reading topicality or even framework is to read a dissad with it. And I mean like a 30, 45-second dissad. The reason as to why I say this is because if you do have a standard that's like limits or predictability, say for example, they no link out of the dissad, then that's granting you all of your limits and clash and predictability arguments, because it means that you had no ground to contest them because they can always link out of the offense. So reading like a short shell to prove the abuse on topicality is really good to both, one, give you like ethos points with the judge, but also two, to illuminate all the arguments and inflate all the arguments that you're going for on the standard level offense. So read limits, or read a dissad with your limit standards to show why exactly their topicality shell makes no sense. We cool with that? Great. So when we're talking about any of those tactics, remember that you want to have preemptive reasons as to why they just don't make any sense or why their interpretation itself is bad, because it's a question of models of debate. And I'm just going to write that on the board because so many people forget that. Like, your theory shell is a question of the ways in which you're engaging within the debate space, or the ways in which you're offering the best model for debate. So when I say that you should always start your 2NR with debate as a game, they're going to try to win that debate itself is an advocacy space. So you need to win debate as a game versus it's a place of advocacy. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't say that debate itself cannot be a place of advocacy. You can say that, sure, but you would want to make the argument that debate itself is about the procedural ways in which people can engage, because at the end of the day, it's not a site for someone's like in-round liberation. It's a site in which everyone should be able to contest, because if only ever one person was going to be able to get in-round liberation, then that will exclude a variety of other people. So you want to set up reasons as to why debate itself being a game itself is good. So can someone give me reasons as to why that could be true? Why is debate as a game good? Yeah.
Like clash is valuable, anything else probably just turns the game into, like turns debate into a monologue.
Why can't you have clash if you're defending it as an advocacy statement?
I mean, like, it's probably contingent on you weighing like the limits and predictability arcs, or just like clash too.
Yeah, sure. So I guess if you go for debate as a game, you can go for like a clash argument, not really understanding what the distinction is between that and advocacy space. What's another reason as to why debate itself is a game rather than an advocacy space?
If you have a judge who has to like determine a winner, there's always a winner and a loser.
Yeah, so like if debate itself is really a site for advocacy, then why is that exactly, is there a way in which the judge can check off aff or neg? There always has to be an aff or neg. We don't do like double point wins or like everyone wins in debate. Like that's just not
Double
it. You don't get a
draws.
cookie for trying, I'm sorry. So you have to be able to win the fact that there's always a wins and loss rates, which means that even if it's an advocacy space, you still have to get determined based off of how you play the game. Or some people go for the fact that there are structural ways in which the game should be played. Like we all abide to speech times, right? We all abide to CrossSex time, right? We all come in and we've done some semblance of research on the topic, or at least in terms of like all the resolutions of that year, right? So there are structural ways in which you came into the debate space and you chose to engage within that forum of it. So you have to go for an argument where debate itself is a game because of X, Y, and Z reason, and that beats any other advocacy space argument. Another argument that I think goes to support models of debate are questions of form versus content. This is recently a new phenomenon when it comes to framework debates, and I think framework debaters took this from K-debaters, but I think it's strategic in the ways in which framework debaters can use it. So basically, the form versus content distinction is the idea or the argument that there is a certain structure, i.e. the form, to how you present your argument, versus the content, i.e. what exactly you present. So I'll give you an example. Say, for instance, I chose to get up in here and perform some type of song about my identity as like a woman, or my identity as being black within America and stuff like that, right? Then I get up and I put that in the sense of performance. The content of that is about my blackness and about my womanness within America, and how maybe I relate to like Orientalism within Japan, and how I relate to the militarization that Japanese people are not allowed to have, because as a black woman, black people are typically not allowed to be militarized. The content talks about the topic, right? I'm talking about military capabilities, I'm talking about Japanese people, I'm talking about somewhere about the resolution. But the form itself is not in the form in which Japan appeals or amends Article 9. So there's a form versus content distinction. The content is all of the stuff that you're talking about and all of the composition of what you're talking about. The form is how exactly you're advocating for it. Now, the reason as to why this is essential for framework debaters is because framework debaters are always making an argument on the content of form. What they're arguing is that it's a question of how exactly you're presenting your arguments that allow for the most accessible form of engagement. So say, for example, my interpretation again is to defend, the debaters must defend the hypothetical implementation of the terms of the resolution resolved X, Y, and Z. Then I'm telling you that the form in which you're presenting all of your stuff needs to be about the state. It needs to be about the resolution in some way, shape, or form. The content can stay the same. You can still talk about your blackness, you can still talk about your womanness, you can still talk about all of that, but the form of it needs to differ. The reason as to why this is strategic is because you're not telling them that you can't talk about your identity. You're not trying to repress them with framework. So when people make framework is policing arguments, you can make arguments that no, it is not about that. Rather, it's a question of how you're presenting your argument that allows for the best predictability and clash. We all cool with that? Yeah? Cool. Another way in which you want to present your model of debate, and one that helps illuminate the form versus content distinction, is with a TVA. So topical versions of the affirmatives or the TVAs basically function as counterplans. Always think of it as a counterplan, because it really is. So you want to go for a TVA that solves back for the aff and also illuminates all the offense that you're going for, because the reason as to why you want to do that is because you want to show that the aff could have been topical, but they chose not to. Here's my plan text, here's my counterplan or my TVA that shows how all their offense could have been resolved if they just abided by my interpretation. So I think that if you have the TVA, if you have like a form versus content argument, if you have a debate as a game argument in terms of the framing of your 2NR overview, I think you're totally set in terms of like engaging with them, or at least solving back for a lot of the offense that they're talking about. Are we all cool with some of the framework stuff?
With the TVA, could you just like write like text and like that's it? Or do you need like a solvency advocate?
You don't need a solvency advocate. You can just write a text. So like, unlike the actual plan, it's not an actual counter plan. It's still a TVA. So all you need is a plan text. You should explain the net benefits as how the plan text that you're advocating for, the TVA that you're advocating for, solves back for all of their offense. Are we cool with that? Yeah. Yeah.
Wait, so what does TVA stand for?
Topical version of the affirmative, and it's basically a counter plan that meets your inter but also solves back for the aff. Okay, we all cool with that? Yeah, we all get how to strategically engage with framework and stuff? Cool. So let's talk about critiques a little bit. But yeah, I just want you to remember this. I'm not saying that you shouldn't go for framework. I think framework is a good tactic because some of these affs be too untopical at times. So read framework itself as a strategy. But if you can't read framework or if you don't have the most optimal judge for a framework round, then you should probably be willing to go for critique. Now, some things that I think you should note about critiques are that critiques are very, very good and easy to engage with if you read the literature. If you are unread in the literature, or if you have not read the stuff that you are about to advocate for, then it oftentimes harms you at the end of the day, especially if you get a judge who's already nuanced in your literature, because it lets the debate not be about something interesting or not being about something that's actually engaging, and oftentimes just becomes a debate in which the judge doesn't actually care about your position. But there's 3 types of affs if you're trying to engage in a KVK debate. The first aff would be an identity politics aff. So these are the affs about like model minorities, about blackness, about like feminism, about, I don't know, whatever else people say about in regards to identities, like disabilities and stuff like that. Then there are the postmodern affs. This is like your Bolger or Deleuze. Now remember in this lecture, I'm only going to cover the surface of those. If you want to know more about those actual bases, you can come talk to me or other people during office hours about that. But there's Bolger, there's Deleuze, there's Heidegger. You should know these theories, or at least know the surface level explanation for these theories. So like Baudrillard, for instance, would be like debate itself is bad, or the ways in which we role play and engage within apparatuses or institutions themselves are bad because of like communicative purposes. Heidegger would be like existential existence itself is weird and wonky. Deleuze would be like we have so many parts of our identity that we can't understand and that we are more than ourselves. Like you are not who you are yesterday, you are becoming something more. Stuff like that, right? And then there's like the structural critiques, which AKA will always be like CAP because debaters aren't unique, they'll just read CAP. So be ready for these debates or engage within those debates. So let's start with CAP, or at least let's start with some of these arguments. So if you're going to try to engage in, let's say, like a CAP debate, you want to pigeonhole the app in CrossSex to asking certain questions. I don't know if any of you have taken like any of the CrossSex modules, but those are so essential if you're trying to answer an app, because you want to ask the app different questions about what exactly is it advocating for and why exactly is it linking to any of the positions that you're talking about. So say, for example, you want to establish links to CAP. Let's go back to the model minority example. Say, for example, I had a model minority app. Model minority app did everything I already told you all it did, and then I'm trying to read a CAP K on the negative. I should ask questions like, how exactly does your 1EC engage in questions of productivity? What about the 1EC does something within the world? Maybe I want to get a productivity link into capitalism to say that they are trying to be more productive in a capitalistic infrastructure, which is bad. So CrossSex is so damning and so essential that you need to strategically utilize it so that you can ask questions that can hold the debaters to their advocacies, because K-debaters are treaty debaters, so are so many other debaters. You want to hold them to their advocacy so they're not shifting in the 1AR. Another thing, and this also applies to a framework too, is that you should always check abuse. So like, say for example, you want to get them to violate like hypothetical implementation. Or say for example, you want to get them to establish like a link in CrossX. Always just like straight up ask them the question, like, do you defend hypothetical implementation of the resolution? Some of them will be honest with you and tell you no. Others will probably try to lie or try to weasel out the question. Always just at least ask the question so that at least the conversation was established and the judge has seen it. Same thing with like a CAP K. If you're trying to read a CAP K, then you should talk about how the 1AC causes some residual instance of cap. So at least come up with like instances in your mind. Now say for example, you want to have an identity politics critique that is being read, and you want to indict them for reading some positions. Identity politics goes into two subcategories. This will either be optimistic or pessimistic / nihilistic, and all theories engage with that. So you'll get queer optimism, queer futurism, just like you'll get queer pessimism or queer nihilism. You'll get black optimism, black futurism, just like you'll get black pes or Afro-pes or black nihilism. So you'll always get those arguments. You, as the debater who wants to run Ks, needs to strategically come up with answers to both of these sides. So you need to quickly identify the arguments those debaters are running versus like the arguments that you want to make. So if they're making an optimistic based arguments, maybe that can strengthen your interp or your violation on framework, because it means that if they're saying that we can be optimistic about the world, then you should be able to say that we can engage within the state or engaging in the state good. If they are saying that we can be optimistic about the world and maybe you want to run a CAP K or an identity politics K, then you should rather say the opposite of what they're saying. We shouldn't be optimistic about the world. So you can choose how you engage there. Say for example, they're reading a pessimistic argument, however. Maybe the arguments that you want to make are that you can be optimistic or that they should be optimistic instead. So always counter the claims that they're going for. Are we all clear on that? Yeah? Yeah, what's up?
So what did you say to do if their like thing was optimistic?
So if their claim is optimistic, you can either try to win that on the interp. Like say for example, I am reading an app that is Deleuzian, or I'm reading an app that says that we should advocate for model minority liberation or black liberation. Then a way in which we can advocate for black liberation looks like state engagement, right? Because black people can't engage in the state. Or you can do the total opposite of that and say, if you want to go for the K, optimism itself bad, we should have more pessimistic engagement. So make sure that if you're engaging in an identity politics app, you're identifying the different lit bases or the different vein of arguments that it is, because they typically fall in those two categories. We all cool with that? Yeah.
Also, I just heard back from Monica. Harshini's not feeling well.
Okay,
I
that's
have
fine.
no idea if she's contacted the office or not, but that's just what Monica said.
That's
So,
fine. Yeah, so are we all good with that? Okay, cool. So if we are now engaging in postmodernism, like I said, is a long vein of literature. I will not get into it today because that's a lot. But Deleuze, Baudrillard. Oh, I always spell Baudrillard wrong. It's like this. So. And let's say like Heidegger or something. Those are like the most common you'll see in debate, with the first two being more common than like Heidegger. But like Baudrillard and Deleuze are always like apps that you'll see. Just to like quickly like explain what they are so they all know. Deleuze talks about this thing like rhizomatic politics. If y'all know what a rhizome is, it's basically a plant with a bunch of branches. And what he's arguing is that the way in which we are as people is basically like a plant. We are not just one thing or one static thing in a singular moment. Rather, we have the possibility of seeing ourselves and becoming more than what we are. So he argues like this idea of rhizomatic politics or rhizomatic practices in which we can engage and become more than what we were in one moment. That's Deleuze. Baudrillard, however, is just like, communicative theory means that we have entered a world which is called the hyperreality. Basically what he means of hyperreality is that we've entered like Disneyland, but in real life, in which we only ever engage in things based off of television, based off of media, based off of entertainment, which is oftentimes fictionalized, and that's bad because it causes us to do erratic things, or it causes us to believe in like a Disneyland world that is not actually real. So those are basically what those two authors are arguing. What you need to do, however, you don't have to be an expert in Baudrillard, you don't have to be an expert in Heidegger, you don't have to be an expert in Deleuze to answer any of these arguments. What you do, however, need to know is like the basis of these arguments. You should have reasons as to why Deleuze is bad, why Baudrillard is bad, so that if you're engaging with any of these apps, you are set up to answering them. So maybe like Deleuze's understanding of like everyone having the possibility to become or see more than what they are ignores the ways in which Native American people are undergoing genocide in the same way in which they're undergoing genocide 100 or 200 years ago. So it ignores the possibility that not everyone has the chance of becoming, but rather some people have a very static identity that they cannot see out of. So when people advocate for like black people to be liberated, it's like, no, these people have very static identity in which brutality has not shifted at all, no matter what the age is. Same thing with like Baudrillard. Maybe you just want to disprove Baudrillard's communicative thesis and are like, hey, not everyone's living in Disneyland or not everyone's living in a hyper reality. Rather, people are very much engaged within the real, and maybe all of his arguments don't make any sense. Have insights to those two so that you are ready or at least engaged with some of the stuff that they're talking about and you're set up to answering some of these positions. But yeah, do we all get that? At least in the Baudrillard and Deleuze debate? Cool. Now, say for example, you're trying to run like Deleuze, Baudrillard, or Heidegger. I think that Baudrillard itself is easier to run in the sense of like it doesn't really have a terminal impact until it's read against the aff. Some affs, like say for example, they're talking about liberation, base themselves off the liberation within the debate space. You can just be like debate space not key, debate space bad, but you should always take them up on the methodology or how they advocate for their arguments. Now, if you're hitting a non-T-aff, non-T-affs, like I said, they engage within like 3 different types, either their cap, identity politics, postmodern. That's the content of those affs. The form of those affs differ. You can get performance affs. So like that goes back to me saying that I read like a narrative or something. So this is about content. The form could be performance. It could be just a straight up like carded K debate. So cards with K-lit. Or it can be the combo of the two. And I'll put like debate bad as a subpoint under performance. A lot of these arguments have commonalities, but they also have their own nuances. So every time you say performance aff, you should ask the questions of, what does your performance do to spill over into the real world? What exactly is this strategy that you're presenting? Is it a survival strategy? Is it a liberation strategy? Then have the dissets as to why survival strategies don't make any sense. You should indict the aff at every moment. If it's cards with K-lit, this probably is also easier to engage in because they probably link hard into one of these 3 categories. So you have indicts to one of those 3 categories, then you're fine. You can just attack the content with your K. If you are hitting a combo, then that gives you even more links because you can both indict performance while at the same time indicting their K-lit. Are we all cool with that? So if you're hitting a performance app, you should be willing to say, hey, performance itself bad, or hey, the way in which you're positing the performance, your form of debate itself nonsensical, so you should reframe it. Or you should lose because of these 1Ks thesis. But these are the different ways of engaging. Now, again, just like how if you're engaging in framework debate, you don't want to concede the role of the ballot, you should defend your role of the ballot. So either offer a counter role of the ballot or offer indicts as to why their role of the ballot does not make any sense and why it's nonsensical at the end of the day. We all cool with that? Do we all feel like we can somewhat engage with a framework or a KF? Yeah? Cool, because I'm going to test you. So if you don't have any more questions, we're going to do a semi-drill. Are we all cool for that? Yeah? All right. Can you start off, let's see. There's 19 of you. Can you start off with 1?
Yeah, 1, 2, 3.
And then go back to 1?
1, 2,
3.
1,
2,
3.
1. 2, 3.
1,
2.
1.
Okay, cool. I'm going to read you all different strategy scenarios, and I want you to come up with the best strategy in whatever group you are in, your 1s, your 2s, your 3s, against this type of app, so that you all have different strategies or the best scenarios. So for this one, I'll give you the app, what it looks like, how exactly it's ran, just so that you are thinking strategically how to use it. Because you don't want to just rely on your coach to explain everything to you. You should be able to do it yourself too. So, first app, are we all good to hear the story of it? I'm not going to read an app, I'll just give you the story. So, this app is a performance app. It gives a poem at the top that talks about the occupation of women's bodies, both within the real world in places like Japan during military occupations, but also how debate itself tries to foreclose women's bodies and conversations on women, like the fact that women are always told that things are too high pitched, or the fact that women are not able to advocate for things, or like women have to dress properly. The solvency is predicated on in-round performances of rage and how women are seen as lesser. So what the debater is advocating for is rage itself as the best praxis. The speech or the 1AC has 1 carded preempt against topicality. Now, the judge for this round is a judge who's good for both topicality and critique debates. However, in their paradigm, they've written that they are tired of debaters reading T versus K apps in order to foreclose a conversation about sexism or racism in debate. So they think that debaters should start engaging a little bit more. And they're tired of the ways in which debaters have done it unstrategically in the past to engage in framework rounds. Now, it's up to you all to come up with the best strategy. I want to hear, if you're going for framework, what the TVA sounds like, what the turns of the case arguments sound like, what your voter is, and yeah, exactly that. And if you're going for a K, I need to hear what the link is, or what are the links maybe, what the alt is, and what's the impact of the K. We all cool with that? I'm gonna give you a minute 30, you can collab with your group, or 2 minutes, you can collab with your group, come up with the best answer, and whoever wins that round, whatever group wins it, I'll be very proud of them, because you're not gonna get everything. But cool, ready? I'm gonna set the 2 minutes now, so you better talk.
2 minutes?
Yeah, 2 minutes.
Where did three
Probably
sit?
1:30, honestly.
Where does three? Who's the three in this group? Three? I guess we need.
Agree with one.
Yeah. This was where I left this.
Is that yours?
Yeah.
Oh.
Just like me.
Okay.
Yeah. He versus P. Then you would do the
Just a bunch of Julie. Yeah, that's right.
Be social, talk to each other.
I'll take my some for K.
I'm sorry.
So I guess nothing is then we
Cap or prolong.
yeah. Performance should we invite the performance of it?
K or do T.
No, which one is better?
It's not successful.
Prolong is just like investing in the ballots and things like you can generate.
Are we talking about
Something that doesn't
specifically or like spelling?
Less than a minute left.
Your capitalism.
Like, I would just
Or
like,
come up with something,
Like,
just
So we could do that.
you're saying we have to have, and it's talking about like
Yeah.
women's rights, how that.
So
Yeah,
we
we
need
think
to
about
follow
it.
it.
Yeah.
It has to do with Japan, for that, right? Just turn it and say like, oh, the worst one there is the worst one that I treat.
But what are the
Be more accessible, more educational, like, that way, not really just like easy.
We do like the productivity, like, yeah. It's like they increase like their goals, they increase productivity. But like increasing productivity within a capitalist society is that
Just do T and let's make an R that big.
That's time. Okay, who wants to tell us their idea first? Do y'all need more time?
Yeah.
I think we're good.
Okay, y'all are good? Okay, so that group can go first, and then whatever other group will go second, third.
Alright, our strat would be to go with the old cap K.
Okay.
We would link into it like sexism is like embedded in like capitalist power structures. And like their argument is like increased productivity, that's bad because it just further perpetuates like the entrenchment of like capitalism, and that like it's a prerequisite to solving like any other harms with like structural violence and stuff.
Okay, and what are the links?
Like they're increasing productivity.
Okay.
It's like they're propping up the system.
Okay, and what's your counter roll of the ballot?
Counter roll the ballot? Shit. We didn't get there.
Okay, and your alt is what exactly?
It would be just reject the AC.
Okay. This might be a very short one NC though, because you only have 3 cards, you only have 1 link. So I need a little bit more for that, Shell, but so far it's a good start. Yeah. So right now we have a cap K with a productivity link. No roll of the ballot as of yet. So there, I think Mike can see the apps roll of the ballot. Anyone else? Are y'all group 1 or 2? What group are y'all? 1? Okay, group 2, whoever that is. I don't know who that is. Oh, okay.
We would do something like, we would actually do T, and then besides answering like the 1 card preamp, we would probably do some sort of interpretation about Japanese, like defining like military offensive capabilities and talking like, kind of like centering the debate around, like, they should defend like the definition that we're posing to them, and then we probably also make some sort of argument about how like debate is actually like a game and it's not exactly a place of advocacy, and a TVA would probably be something like, oh, you could have like done, you could have you still could have like engaged the topic more by like talking about, like, for example, military, like amending Article 9 directly resulting in what happens to women, so that could be like technically a topical like contention argument, still talking about women.
Okay, do you have something to add?
Well, I was like thinking about a different sort of thing. Like I was gonna run like a femk and talk about, and like one of the links would be like a dissad to a case that says like, well, the more military people there are, like the more likely it is for women's bodies to be abused. Cause like I have like some study that talks about like how like when there's more military in Japan, like the amount of like structural violence against women goes up. And so then that would be my link to it, and basically just turn that argument to say like, okay, well then that argument supports the neg because there's more violence against women in the aff.
Okay. I actually think the combination of both of your strategies would work best. So this round, remember that the judge does not like topicality. The judge hates topicality to like the end point, like no. But however, if it is a T-shell that defines one of the words or the jargons or terms of arts that are used within the resolution, then that would be good to read a T-shell about that, which I think that the group is doing well on. And combining that with the dissad to illuminate that absent talking about the actual topic literature, you allow for real world violence to continue happening to women because you don't engage within the topic. That would be a good strategy to show because you're showing the actual consequences of the debater not engaging within the resolution while at the same time saying that you have to engage in some residuals of the resolution. So combining the two. I think absent that though, for you all, the T-shell kind of becomes obsolete if the debater or if the judge doesn't know how to evaluate it or weigh it because the judge is very, very much so against T.
Yeah,
so
we
you
were
wanna...
thinking about like combining it because then it made more sense.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I think that would be the best option. All right, your group.
We went with Cap 2. We made poetry good.
Okay.
And we said like the impact would be more accessibility, and our counter wrote about was like vote for the debater who makes the debate space more accessible.
How is poetry linked to CAP?
So we said like basically it's not accessible to everyone because first most people have to buy it, and also like analyzing it I guess is difficult for some people.
Yeah. Add a link to yours. Add a link to
We
yours.
have that link.
Oh, you got that link.
I didn't read it.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't on my computer. I didn't think of it.
Okay, cool. So we got a 2-link K. Alright, that's better. Cause like one link might have just been kind of wonky, but yeah, we got a 2-link K.
We also
Alright,
added
cool.
a roll to ballot. You can.
Say again?
We also added a roll.
Oh, what's the roll ballot then?
Vote for the better debater.
Okay, and what's your roll of the ballot?
Vote for the debater who makes the debate space more accessible.
Oh, okay. I feel like it's gonna be hard to, cause you kind of want your roll of the ballot to be slightly self-serving, just in the sense that it makes it very, very easy for them to also win that because they're like, it's accessible for me, I'm raging. It's a question of how exactly I can engage. So you want it to be a question of like pedagogy or like anti-cap pedagogy. If their app cannot scale up to solving back for capitalism, then it will always be bad. All right, are we good for a second app scenario? Cool. So the judge for this round is middle of the road judge. He says you can basically do you, but you can't be offensive when you do it, right? So the app itself is a K-app that analyzes the biopolitical nature of military offensive capabilities, and by biopolitics, I basically mean the security logic behind military offensive capabilities and how that causes Japan to be seen as an otherized nation. So Japan is considered as otherized because it does not have access to military offensive capabilities. So first, the solvency of the app would be to have a genealogical analysis, i.e. a historical analysis of why Japan was credited to be that way in the first place. In the app, there's one T-card preempt that says that rules and restrictions are a sense of biopolitics or are forms of surveillance, and if you read T, it's a form of that surveillance. The role of the ballot in that app is to endorse the debater with the best deconstruction of a military pedagogy. I will give you all 1:30 to talk and come up with some good scenarios.
What do you want to run? We already got like military. They're running like 5 star. Right? Like we already got like military uses like it's literally becoming like mobilized.
I mean,
What do they do to fix it though?
yeah, roll the ballot. Maybe come below the ballot, like when it comes to below of the ballot.
So just like solvency.
Yeah.
So just like a 10-point veto, like I said.
We can still do the
Yeah.
but just how we do it.
Okay, now let's read this. Maybe we read it oriented, okay? That's all we have.
Oh, it's orange, like you saw.
15 seconds left.
Oh, what do we need to do?
No, it's the
Should we
everything
do
else,
T?
we're gonna do something about it. But what's the alt?
Oh, sure.
That's 10. Do y'all need more time? No, we're good? Okay. Do you want to start first then? Since you went last?
I think we need a.
Okay. Alright, what about y'all? Do y'all need more time too? Yeah? Okay. I'm gonna give you another minute. If there's any difficulties in the app, ask me questions. Remember, I said CrossSex is essential.
How do you solve for Japan being otherized?
It's not a question of whether or not you can solve for Japan being otherized, but rather the app functions as a prerequisite to that. Before you can engage in any policy action or in any like actual action, you need to analyze the ways in which military power has caused Japan to be seen as a bad nation. So the app is a sequencing issue for all of you forever debaters.
So like, the problem, you state that like you wanted to have the person that like best deconstructs the otherness, although like, isn't it, when, I'm trying to think how to phrase this. I'm sorry. Although the negative that responds to better deconstruction of like securitization, because especially like because it talks about like how we need to contribute to like to globally to other issues around the world instead of just focusing on securitization.
I would say that we can focus on this issue because it's the root causes why other issues are there. So militarism causes things like sexism, causes things like racism, because the military is very sexist, homophobic, and racist. So we first must analyze the ways in which that is so before we can go into action. Otherwise, you lead to things like serial policy failure.
Oh wait, is this an app or a neg?
This is an app. These are all K-apps.
Okay, so otherwise, but wouldn't you agree that the more military there is, the more issues that there are? Because you stated that like.
I don't defend the resolution.
Oh right.
Alright, do y'all have an F? Or a neg, sorry. No? Do y'all still need more time? What's the difficulty with this one?
I think we have something.
You have something? Okay, let's hear it.
Read it off
So it's probably gonna start with like a 10-point util dump to just like try to outframe them.
Okay.
Just a disad that goes like extinction, whatever. A CP that's probably gonna solve case sufficiently just to be able to weigh the disad against it. Roll the ballot's probably just gonna be vote for the better debater with like a bunch of self-serving and arbitrary stuff.
So, you said CP, disad, and util dump?
Yeah,
Okay. What's the link to the disad?
I don't know, it's probably gonna be like a generic disad that you can link to a whole res app, cause it's probably topical action, so
It's not. I just said I'm an analysis.
sketch.
Yeah, so also the util dump. Remember that I didn't give you what the terminal impact of the app is. So if the app is a question of biopolitics or militarism, then that can link into a consequentialist impact. So even if you do util, I can still say that we're consequentialists because we're talking about issues of militarism which can lead to extinction or which can lead to racism, which can lead to whatever else. So you should not prioritize the util dump and try to find a link either with a disad or a K or a framework that would solve that for the app. Anyone else have a different strategy? Yeah, what's up?
So would T implement be good against this?
Yeah, you can read T implement.
Okay.
Because remember, I'm not actually implementing the resolution. I'm supposed to be a prerequisite to the resolution or whatever. Yeah.
Can you do like a policy simulation roll of the ballot?
Yeah, you can. I think it's a good roll the ballot against this app because this app would say policy simulations are bad, that rules and restrictions are surveillance. You could be like, no, not every instance is surveillance. No other strategies? Y'all have this strategy, maybe? For this group? I'm trying to make y'all creative thinkers, come on. Let's hear one.
I think
Yeah.
we kind of did like we don't know, we weren't sure what the link was, that we said we might do like kind of an Orientalism K into like saying that by analyzing it, you're pointing out that there's something wrong with the fact that like if there's any rhetoric about like Japan being like a bad nation or Japan being like kind of it's like if there's any rhetoric within like this biopolitical like that talks about how like you're analyzing it, which is like a form of kind of critiquing the fact that Japan has a problem, and that itself is kind of Orientalist, which links to the fact that like you're otherizing it even more, which kind of like turns off in a way. And then the counter rule of the ballot is either we're not sure yet, but either like we keep the same rule of the ballot and just like weigh between them and like say that we do it better, or it would be like a self-serving rule of the ballot, which is like reject like the 1AC for any like.
So I think that your strategy would be good if I were to say that Japan was Orientalist. So if I were making the argument that I'm calling Japan Orientalist, that would be a better strategy because it would show the double turn. But what I'm saying is that the status quo or the nature of politics is what makes Japan Orientalist. So we should analyze why militarism constructs Japan into being the Orientalist other. So you are making a good argument if I made a different claim or a slightly different claim. So remember that. So far we haven't heard like a great strategy as of yet that will be taken out by the 1AR. Can maybe y'all give us a strategy?
We were also going for an Orientalism K,
Okay.
but it was just like, they said that theirs was a prerequisite, but ours is like inclusive of the prerequisite, so like we'd be solving for the like authorization.
How do you come at the term?
We didn't really get there.
Okay. Alright, do you have another?
For the Orientalism thingy, is the link just like assimilation bad?
For them?
Yeah.
Well, their link didn't work out this round, but yeah, you can make the argument that assimilation is bad. So we have no strategies, y'all? Okay, well, okay, so maybe framework can be a strategy. Again, this is a middle of the road judge. This judge doesn't have any things against topicality or any things against Ks. So remember, framework itself is always an option. The TVA can probably be endorsing the resolution. The net benefits to that is addressing the ways in which Japan is not granted offensive military capabilities, and Japan was rendered subservient to westernized nations. So if they have military offensive capabilities, they're able to defend themselves. Solves back for the entirety of the 1AC because it means that we analyze the ways in which Japan was rendered defenseless while at the same time giving them a strategy to solve back for that. If you want to do a K maybe, the productivity link still works because analysis requires some level of productivity because you still have to analyze and still try to do like historical examinations there. Another link could be like to like a Bolger K where it's like debating the game or trying to engage within the game assumes that analysis within the debate can solve for anything, but Japan will still have Japanese problems. You will still be Orientalist or people will still be Orientalist. You have not done anything outside of this game. So remember, be creative with how you're going for it. The last scenario before I release you all, Bulgarian AF. All of the tags of the 1AC make fun of topicality. So it's like the hypothetical implementation of the 1AC is to go to McDonald's and they're just making fun of the app or making fun of topicality all throughout the app itself. Then their advocacy is just to implode debate by coming up with so many nonsensical strategies that debate stuff like topicality doesn't make any sense, or that engaging with an analysis doesn't make any sense. The judge is like a very much so like K-leaning judge, but they're fine with topicality if you just run topicality and win it. Come up with a strategy. I'll give you all a minute for that. Okay, a minute starting now. Let's have this be your best strategy, okay?
They're just making fun of
Because just be like there's no songs. How was that? It links to like
KJs should probably gonna think they're
Okay.
Yeah.
Or I guess we
What is
just
it
probably.
for?
I was thinking
What
30 seconds.
They try to do something with the ballot. They feel like
Oh, she's gonna have a little. You can make it procedural.
oh, you have to
You can make it procedural.
Oh, that's like before.
also do something about strong
Okay.
about how like
They're the two.
I also just think honestly.
Okay, that's 10. We probably don't have time for everyone to give, but does one group want to share a strategy that they came up with? We're really falling short on these strategies, y'all. Okay. Yeah.
You could go for Berlant, I guess, with the idea that like them investing some optimism in the ballot that it can actually like generate change or something. It's like cruel optimism because it can't do anything. And I think T framework is probably good to go along with Berlant. And you can probably address all of them like trying to be on topicality through the entirety of the 1 issue with just like a few little blips, just like don't let them win the case, this and that. And then just like a dump on case with like some statement stuff, I guess.
So I think that's a good strategy, but you have to be wary of the contradiction. So you just told me that investing hope within the ballot bad, but then you're reading topicality, which assumes that the judge checking off for you in the ballot would allow for better debate applications or better debate rules. Be wary of that contradiction because it can bite you in the 2NR. I would also be wary of going for Berlant against Bourdieu, just because Berlant and Bourdieu are kind of compatible with one another. They're both the criticism debate. So I would make sure that if you're going to try to go for that strategy, that there is nuance within that. But if no one has